going to look at it from a behaviors point of view, because technology is only one part of the problem. The other part is behaviors. Behaviors result in cultures, and that's what actually changes and creates a data-driven culture. There is no data-driven companies, there's only data-driven cultures, right? Every company today wants to be a data company, right? And we look at the so-called data natives, Uber, Facebook. We get really intimidated by the way they use data. And that is because if you literally, and I go back to the morning session by the gentleman from the government of Rajasthan in the morning, and he spoke about the importance of people. One of the things about data-driven companies is the people themselves are data people. They are engaged with the data completely. So unfortunately, and he had the Gartner statistic on there. I'll give you a McKinsey statistic saying that only 8% of the companies in the world, out of the 1,000 they surveyed, actually can claim that they are somewhat data-driven. There's another one which says only 1/3 of the analytics projects that ever start actually end successfully, right? So there's a bunch of statistics, but the truth is that the culture evades most of us. So the question is, how do you become a data-driven organization? There is no one answer to this, but what we have is, Tableau has about 80,000 customers today. We went back to all our deployments. We talked to them about, what are their measures of success. There's some of the largest corporations in the world, largest deployments in terms of number of users using analytics, and a few strong themes emerged. It was not necessarily very specific, instances of doing things, while I'll talk about a couple of them. But the three critical behaviors that emerged. The first one was a balance of empowerment and control. And I'll drill deeper on each one of them. The second one was a widespread access to data for a lot more people. And finally, an internal data community. Right? So let's drill down and maybe double click into some of them. So one is balance of freedom and control. How many of you do not have a BI solution today? Right? Yeah, so that's like 1% of the room, right? Everyone has BI. Unfortunately, one of the things is, and I'll again, right, at the morning session was very insightful for me. The gentleman talked about the difficulty of writing requirements. And this is something very fundamental in analytics. Analytics is about answering questions. How can somebody nail down requirements for a question? What if I have a different question tomorrow? Right? So it's essentially something that needs to keep evolving, and a producer-consumer model does not necessarily scale. It will scale in a few cases, you will have a few successes, but you will never have a pervasive culture. So typically I call this a report factory. Right? There's a few developers sitting out in IT or sometimes analysts in the business. They collect requirements, they connect to data, they produce a report. It goes through the traditional waterfall cycle of executing projects, and something is delivered to the business. And then the box is checked off, of course, we delivered something to the business. But unfortunately, in most cases, it becomes unusable after a period of time. Right? The excitement is not sustained. And contrast that with something which is self-service. Right? People connect to the data on their own, work in a data platform or analysis platform of their choice to produce insight and answer questions that they need to answer when they need to answer, share those insights with others. It just becomes a much more scalable model of doing things. While there is a bunch of technology investments and infrastructure that has to come into place to do this, it is something that is very critical. Self-service helps you become more data-driven. A producer-consumer model does not. The self-service also requires a balance between how much freedom you give people, because this is important, right? Governance is important, security is important, making sure that the right people have access to do the right things in your systems is critical. These companies, the data-driven companies, the successful deployments, look at governance through empowerment, right? They let their users, give their users sandboxes, for example, saying that here's where you can do something on your own, and here's where you cannot. They create that environment in which people can ask their own questions and get responses. The next behavior, and this is very critical behavior, because I would ask yourself, put this question out to ask yourself, who in your organization can do analytics, right? Who can do analytics? I mean, it's a very simple question to ask, but if you sit down with a paper and pencil and start writing down who can do analytics, you'll be surprised as to the kind of answers you will get, right? Typically, it is constrained down to a small set of people, either in departments or in IT, who are looking at data and trying to analyze it. Maybe you have a small data science team somewhere that is trying to do something. But what is the potential? Who can do analytics? Everybody can do analytics. I mean, even somebody who is not a proper, I don't have a big computer, I don't have I mean, everybody does analytics. When you book your tickets on flights, you do analytics. You play on the stock market, you do analytics, right? You're doing analytics all the time. Data is fundamentally embedded into our processes and functions today. To not be able to use that data to make effective decisions is a challenge. So, to use that data, people need to have a certain amount of literacy with the data. And this is another problem, because I go into meetings, I have conversations saying, hey, I can't give them that data because they don't know what to do with it. I find it difficult to sort of understand, or the people sort of find it difficult to understand, oh, I have access to all this data, how can I create meaningful, reports, dashboards, charts, visuals, insights with it? So here is a premise. Fundamentally, you have to treat data as a language. It is the language of the new enterprise, right? Essentially, if something is a language, you need to be able to view it and understand, oh, this is data in front of me. You need to be able to read it, right, which is essentially consume, right? When you open the newspaper in the morning and you have a bunch of charts in front of you, do you get intimidated by it, or you just gloss it over, or you just sit down with the chart? I'm one of the guys who sits down with a lot of charts, and I write back to the newspaper, in fact, saying that, hey, your chart does not say the right thing. But you need to be able to know how to consume data, right? And this is something that if you are not doing, if you pushed a bunch of reports out there, how do you know people are using them effectively? Are they even equipped to read what you have given them, right? Or it's, as people say, Greek and Latin to people. And on the other side, there are people who need to, explore and create stuff with the data. These are probably at a higher level of literacy. Look at it as, I know to read and write, but now can I, interpret a poem, or can I write a novel, right? And that is the work of the creators, authors, people who will take the language of data and put it out there in a way people can understand it and consume it, right? So if you look at, on the left-hand side here, there is the whole problem of comprehension. Ask yourself, I have thousands of reports published. How many of them are being used? Why? How do they make sense to people, right? You will be, and I have been surprised by the people who have done this exercise and found out that, okay, there is some things that we need to do. Just the volume of reports out there means nothing today. And on the other side is, how do you communicate data? So data literacy is becoming a fundamental skill. The good thing is the new, there was a talk about millennials and stuff like that. The professor talked about them. A lot of these people are coming with data skills, right? Data is becoming an important part of education, a lot more important. I have a son in 7th standard, and the amount of data in his textbooks is way more than I had. I mean, in one chapter is way more than I had in a whole textbook in my time in the same standard. The next thing is data literacy will not be easy. Right? There's people who will be resistant to it, right? Who love stats, right? I go and ask people, do you know, should you use an average or a median? Right? And people are saying, hey, don't send me back to stats class anymore, right? I can't deal with it. So there have to be different ways for these people to query data. Right? And one of those ways is increasingly natural language. Right? Tableau just launched natural language in its product. It's generally available now. So people can go in and do a Google-like search, and you get answers back as a visual. So you can have a conversation with your data, right? Or if you have the Tableau mobile app, you can go in and it literally becomes a WhatsApp-like conversation where you type a question and a visual comes back, and you type another question and the visual modifies itself and stuff like that. So you get people used to the same paradigm that they use in everyday life. Right? They ask questions and so on and so forth. Make it easier for people to ask questions. The last thing, and this is the thing that literally I have seen very, very, very few Indian companies actually do this. The basis of culture is a community. If you do not have a community, you cannot change culture. You know, while we may talk a lot of stuff about culture in the organization, till you form a community of like-minded people who share some things about the thing you are interested in, you cannot change culture. And the most successful data-driven companies have always created an internal data community. And what is a community, right? Community is not one thing. It lets you do a lot of things. So for example, you can go and recognize people for the work they do. I mean, how many of you, for example, who have BI deployments would do an award ceremony just to recognize, the most efficient, best designed report, right, of the hundreds of reports you have? Or do you have a hackathon which says, come in here and here is a data set, solve a problem with it, and then we'll take it ahead to leadership and see which makes a difference to our bottom line. A few weeks ago, I was actually judging one of the contests as one of the customers, and I'll put up the customer story just later. There were 2 dashboards. They put a data set, it was a controlled data set. They put it out there, real data. They put it out there, they gave it to about 200 people who participated. They came up with 90 ideas on how they can look at this data in different ways. A whole new perspective, because the perspective of the requirement document is one person's perspective or maybe a committee's perspective. It is never the perspective of a lot of individuals who can contribute to this. Right? For example, there is a whole bunch of learning to be done. Right? I am working on this analytical problem here. Can somebody help me with it? Right? Or do I need to always Google? Is there somebody in my organization? Is there somebody who I can associate with, who can coach me, mentor me with respect to this? This is something that is intensely lacking. Something that if you want to change culture, this is something that is extremely critical. But, right, finally it comes down to practice. Right? I have seen things start off and fizzle out. If you have to keep at it, I know of a company that created this really nice internal community and all. They had 3 meetings, every quarter, and then, none for the rest 2 years. Right? Persistence is important. Right? The first one is they actually provided the self-service part, saying that we cannot scale in this manner. They had this whole, 2 floors of people in Bangalore creating reports for the world, and they said it cannot scale because we are not keeping up with the pace of our business. So they switched it, and then they evaluated a whole bunch of tools, they selected Tableau, and then said, how are we going to now enable this, guys? The next thing that they did was they said, okay, now since we have a self-service model, we need to go out and make sure how do we govern and provision the data to these literally 20,000 people, right? They went from about 100 people using Tableau in the launch phase to 20,000 in 2 years, right? And that's a great pace for any company. And finally, they have one of the most vibrant communities of any company that I have seen working out of India. They have like a monthly meetup where, you know, what's new is discussed. You know, they'll have people from Tableau present, they'll have people from Tableau's other customers, they'll have new technology vendors come in and talk about what is happening in the BI space to keep everybody connected in to that initiative. And they have been running this 2 years, 3 years actually, continuously, month on month without failure, right? I'm just 15 seconds remaining on my time here. The most important thing is, you know, as Tableau, we've been a part of some of your journeys. You know, we'd love to, you know, engage with you in different ways on this. We help people see and understand data, right? And that has got nothing to do with analytics. It is about people, it's about data and understanding, right? So once again, thank you very much for letting me speak to you. Have a great rest of the evening. Thank you.